Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Debrief Room. Today's guest is Amy Gonzales. She's a good friend of mine who actually worked a homicide with her many years ago. And we wanted to go over the Mary McCallie case with you guys today. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Um, Go ahead and go through your career. You've had a really good career for 25 years.
Yeah, I started in 2000 at Taylor PD. Before that, in 98, I was a cadet there. So I was paid basically to learn. And then once I turned 20, they sent me to the police academy and I came back and started working there. I
You
worked
did a 2-year program because were you part-time?
part-time. Yes.
Okay.
So I was in college and then also a cadet with Taylor. And the goal was getting sponsored to go to the police academy and then coming back and having a job there.
Yeah, back in those days, you had to be sponsored. You couldn't just pay your money.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
You
had
had
to
to have,
actually want you.
yeah. And so we did that. And then I came back and from 2000 to 2008, I was on patrol, having a really good time. I love the streets. And then 2008, I was abruptly put into investigations as a detective and had no idea what I was doing. And
Yeah, they were watching your work and they realized you would be a good candidate for that. For those of you who don't know, Taylor is in Williamson County, which is north of Austin.
And so from 2008 until I left in late 2014, I was the detective, got tons of experience, and I'm very thankful for Taylor PD. But I left because I got an offer to apply at the DA's office in Williamson County. And by that time I had 3 young kids, and while I was happy with Taylor, I was comfortable with Taylor, I knew like, okay, I gotta move forward, not be stagnant. So the pay was better, the hours were better. I wouldn't have been on call all the time because of Taylor. I was constantly on call. And so I took the job at the DA's office, and then in 2017, I moved over to the AG's office. And I started there. So the AG's office, it's specialized units. And so it's not kind of like the way it is in normal agencies where you're an investigator there and a new case comes in and you're just investigating whatever may come. We have child exploitation, which is what I'm in now, digital forensics, human trafficking, money laundering, election fraud. We have a somewhat newly formed cold case unit, sextortion, Medicaid fraud. We have it all. So if you're with the OAG, you're in a specialized unit, and those are the only kind of cases that you work. And so I've been
Do
there.
you actually get to work some of the cold cases?
No, I'm not in that unit.
So they're separate.
We're all separate. And so whatever unit you're in, those are the kind of cases you work. So I started out in what was called special investigations, which to me, that was kind of a catch-all. We would do some election fraud investigations, some missing persons. Then we had one unsolved, like a cold case. It was before the cold case unit was formed. And so I stayed there for a little bit and then got an invitation to work in child exploitation. And initially I said, no, I don't want to do that. Like I've heard of that and I have no interest or desire. And then they came at me again and said, well, we have a position that we think you would be good for. And initially I wanted to say no again. But I knew, and Taylor, unfortunately, I had to become good at child abuse investigations. And so they knew that. They knew that I was very good with child abuse investigations, so they asked me to come in. My mom always said, use your gifts to help people. And so reluctantly, I agreed and I accepted and moved into that unit in 2018. And I've been there ever since.
Well, I remember working with you and you were a very good detective in the days that I met you. I also remember Taylor PD at the time. There was very few of you detectives and your caseload was just, we averaged 30 to 40 a piece, but we had 12 detectives and you guys had what, 3?
2.
Two.
I had two.
And y'all were getting every case that Taylor had.
Yeah.
And I remember you guys being buried, and it was not surprising when you left, just because the caseload. I mean, it burns you out so quick. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. In CID, you're just inundated with cases, and you have to learn to prioritize the cases. Even in persons crimes, you have to learn how to prioritize which cases go first, which cases are probably going to be accepted by the DA's office, the most likely to be accepted, and have their buy-in to continue the case on, versus the cases that are just feather-legged, as they called them, barely hanging on. And I remember we had those cases like that, and my hat's off to you that you guys had to put up with so many. I'm surprised you lasted as long as you did. There was so many cases to work. Well, moving on to Mary McCallie. That was 2008, correct? So we'll just begin at the very beginning of how you got this call. And
So I was on patrol, but that was not my call. So April 21st of 2008, she was found in a cemetery, Our Lady of Guadalupe Cemetery. A gentleman who actually was having an affair on his wife. They would meet there. And so he got there that morning. And as he drove in, he noticed a body. He knew who Mary McCallie was. Mary was well known in Taylor. Taylor's a small town, especially back then. And so he left and didn't really know what to do. And so then he ends up meeting with his girlfriend. She was like, "Hey, you need to call the police." And so he called the police, and that's how it began. I had absolutely nothing to do with the case in the beginning stages. I was off that day, didn't respond to the scene. Detectives took it over, and they did all of the investigations. And for days, they were following up on leads. There were so many rumors about it. And so reading the reports is all I knew, and of course talking to the detectives. And I remember being on patrol, knowing there was a murder. Mary's actually a distant cousin. She's my second cousin. And so I knew who Mary was. I wasn't close to her, but keeping up with it and talking to the detectives and hearing, well, they had a good suspect that they thought was going to go for it, and then it just fizzled out. And
was there any DNA in that case at that time?
Um,
Uh,
I couldn't even tell you, like, I didn't even have that much knowledge of what evidence they had or what they were looking at. And so being on patrol and knowing of her case, I wasn't aware of there being DNA.
so fast forward to when you became a detective. How did you get this case assigned to you?
So a CODIS hit came in. And so I come in one day and Captain Georgians says, "Okay, there's a CODIS hit for the Mary McCallie case." And I was like, "Well, okay." And I look at it and I'm like, this says there's a DNA match. And he's like, "Yep, there's a DNA match." And I'm like, "Okay, good. Well, case solved." I didn't know anything about investigations or anything like that. And so he's like, "No, I don't think so." And so then of course I call the DA's office and talk to the prosecutors, and they were like, "Oh no, that because of her lifestyle, Mary was a known prostitute in Taylor and a drug addict. And so they said because of her lifestyle, that DNA hit is nothing unless you get a confession." And so then that's how it all started. So we,
Did you find out how the DNA was submitted? The detective prior to you had submitted it from the autopsy, I guess.
from the autopsy. Yeah. So it was collected at autopsy, and a match did not become available until the suspect was sentenced to 4 years in prison for DWI. So Mark,
What DNA was it? Do you remember which it was? Was it
Semen.
saliva? Semen.
Semen.
Okay. So she was sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Martin, I also knew Martin. not well, but I knew his family. We grew up on the south side of Taylor together, and to me, he was a lot older than me because I remember being a young kid, and Martin, we were good friends with his brother, and Martin was just quiet and withdrawn, and for lack of a better word, meek. I just always had this like a weak individual. Even as a kid, that's how I looked at him. And so getting that CODIS hit, I was like, wow, Martin Hernandez, like this seems weird. Um, and then it went from there. Like
Okay.
I didn't know anything about him personally. I just knew the image that he put out there of himself.
So at what point did you make your first contact with him to interview him about this?
In January of 2009.
Okay.
From the CODIS hit, we got a search warrant for his hairs, blood, saliva, and we went to visit him. Myself, Texas Ranger Matt Lindeman, and Texas Ranger Marcus Hilton assisted me, and we went and interviewed him in prison and told him why we were there and asked him, Mary? And he said that he knew her. He gave us 4 different stories that very first interview. First, he said he knew her, never had sex with her. And then he said that they've only had sex once and it was years ago. And we would say, no, that's not going to work. And then he said, okay, well, um, I had sex with her a few weeks ago. And then the final story was that he had sex with her the Friday before her murder. So she was found on a Monday morning. And he said he had sex with her the Friday before her murder. And that's kind of what he stuck with, but absolutely denied having anything to do with her murder. And he would say, even when you became involved, we would imitate him because that's all he would say during the interviews was, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I mean, he was just still, and just very, very meek. And even interviewing him in prison, he was very quiet, very small, but stuck to his guns that he did not have anything to do with her murder.
So this whole interview, he never gave you any information. So you guys left at that point.
Well, we asked him for like if he would voluntarily submit his DNA, and he said no. Because by then we had said, hey, listen, your DNA came back on Mary and something's not adding up.
Good thing about that, he's in prison, so he can't go anywhere.
Right.
You
And
never
so,
have where to go back and get him.
so at that point, we executed that search warrant that we had drafted up before we went there. And we collected a sample of everything and then we left. But he was not talkative. It's not like during the interview, he had a lot of information or was really arguing or really trying to convince us that he didn't do it. It was just basically he would answer questions and then just sit there quietly and say he didn't do it.
So when I became involved, for those of you that you don't know, that is actually how I met Amy. As I became involved with this case, I was at a neighboring agency, and luckily for me, I had experience with some cold cases myself, and we had worked a lot of death investigations. And Amy and her agency, Taylor PD, asked me to help them out. So I came aboard, and we ended up going and finding Martin. And I'll let her tell you the whole story. I just want to let you know how I became involved with this at all.
So you actually taught me so much because when I became a detective, it's not like I became a detective and I had a senior detective working over me to teach me things and so I came in having no idea how to do investigations or even interviews. Like I remember my initial interviews of suspects, I'd come in the room and I would just be like, yeah, you killed her, right? Just tell me you killed her. There was no discussion. It was just absolutely terrible. And so becoming friends with you and Matt Lindeman, Marcus Hilton, Darren Bells, what I started doing was taking things from each of you. You know, you would each teach me stuff, and I would just find my own way to work it and what worked for me and what didn't work for me. Like, I remember you telling me one time, you know, if you touch a suspect, that really kind of breaks down the walls. You know, got to do it at the right point. And if you just reach over and touch that suspect, then, you know, it'll help you tremendously. And I was like, no way in hell am I ever touching anybody. And I had a case where a dad had, it was suspected that he had beat up his toddler pretty bad. I mean, the baby was in the hospital with some pretty bad injuries, and dad was denying it. And then he's saying, um, you know, he's quiet and he's hunched over and he's crying. And so I thought of you and I tried it. And I just reached over and I put my hand on his arm. And right at that time, the phone rang and startled both of us. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. I'm never touching anybody again. But learning from all of you really was, not only did I learn from you, but then lifelong friends. You know, we became friends since 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And so I've just always been very grateful for all of you and everything you've been able to teach me, and not just for this case, but I there's so many memories I have of us working.
Yeah.
So many cases where we're going out and we're doing interviews. And
Well, the other two cases that you were working at the time, if you want to say the names of those cases, that's up to you.
Katara Johnson.
But
Yeah.
the case is still open, I guess.
Still love it. I wish we could have worked on that more.
Well, you were fortunate enough to work with Matt Lindeman, and you know, he taught me probably everything I know. You know, you can go to schools all day, but until you sit with someone and actually do an interview with them and see the way they do it, because like you said, everybody does it different, and you get a little bit more, a little bit for this person for your tool belt, and you try all of it. You know, the touching people while you interview them, it's worked for me probably 3 times, and the other times it didn't work at all. So it's just kind of those hit and miss things, you know. Luckily for us, it kind of helped out with Martin, I think, when we did that.
Yeah, he was a tough one. So we interviewed Martin and he said, no, I didn't do it. We took his blood and his DNA and his hairs, and we went about our business and continued to investigate. Found his vehicle, his family had his vehicle. But there were so many reports coming in, especially in the initial phase of this investigation, of seeing Mary get into a gold truck, seeing Mary get into a different kind of truck. And I had never heard of someone reporting that Mary got into a Trailblazer, black Trailblazer, at the corner of Rio Grande and Gano, right? Like, that's not something that was ever like, oh, okay, this is some good information. And it wasn't until he came up as a suspect from the DNA. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to find his vehicle that he had during that time, find his vehicle at his family's house. They seem to be hiding it. So myself and Marcus Hilton drove around the neighborhood, and they had a very tall privacy fence. And so we're trying to see, can we see it? Is it back there? From an angle, you were just barely able to see it if you went around the side of the side street next to their house. And so we made contact with the family, and I was just playing it cool to read them and ask them, you know, I'm looking for Martin's vehicle. And they're like, we don't know where Martin's vehicle is. And I'm like, well, ta-da, I got a search warrant. So I'm here. Thank you. I'm taking it. And so we took the vehicle. And that is when I learned that there had been a witness in 2008, in April of 2008, when her body was found, that had said he saw her getting into a black Trailblazer. And so we processed it, did all that, and then we took the vehicle back to that location at nighttime to photograph it. It looked like a black Trailblazer. I mean, it looked like a black vehicle, right? It was just the witness had just said a Trailblazer instead of a Blazer. And so that was a really good moment for us. That's another key piece of evidence. And then we started interviewing other women in Taylor who lived the same lifestyle as Mary. And what we started to learn was that basically all of the ladies would take advantage of Martin. Many times they would get money from him and then not perform the sexual acts and bail on him. There had been a report where Martin had reported that this lady had stolen his wallet and his debit card and some cash. And she, at that time, so this had happened previously, she was now in prison and she was also a prostitute in Taylor. So I went to go visit her and she said, yeah, he was a trick. All of us were familiar with him. And she said, like, he was a drunk. She described him as drunk and crazy. And she said that um, she had been with him one night and then he said, "Yeah, I'm not going to pay you." And so she just waited a little bit. He passed out drunk and she was like, "Yeah, I took his wallet and his debit card. He had given me his PIN, but it didn't have any money. So I wasn't able, I wasn't able to take any money out of his bank account." But she said she got like $600 from him. Um, and she just really kind of laid an even better foundation of this guy is known to have relationships with the local prostitutes and he's an alcoholic and can have a temper. I feel like he had just kind of
And that's something you never knew about him, that he had a temper.
never. And when, I mean, you've sat with him, you wouldn't think that. He seems like a weak individual. And we started learning a lot about Martin. And so we just kept working, kept building the case a little bit stronger. And I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to just let it go. It would have been easy. It would have been easy to just get caught up in my other cases. My mom's a victim of homicide, and I couldn't imagine not knowing what happened to my mom. Like just living every day and not knowing who did it and nobody ever being brought to justice. And so being that she is family, I mean, her mom, I love Mary's mom. And so that drove me like I have to figure out a way. I have to do this somehow. And so just did a lot of legwork. Then me and you were planning to visit him again. And so because he had been switched. So initially where we had gone to visit him when we did that very initial interview in January of '09, he had been moved since then. And so in preparing for another interview, I had just made contact to see where he was. And I learned that he had been released early.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what? He's been released? And so initially I'm thinking, is he back in Taylor? Like, why hasn't he reached out to me to get his car? But I remember one of the things I told him was, I'm not going to go away. Like, I'm not just going to take your story and just think that you didn't do it. Like, you're going to have to deal with me. Well, he didn't want to deal with me. And so he planned to live his life in Houston, where he got released from prison. And he wasn't coming back to Taylor, where all of his family was, where his vehicle was. He just,
Call it a clue.
yeah. And so I was like, Martin's avoiding me. And we contacted his parole officer and scheduled a meeting there at his office. And when he came in, we were ready.
Well, I don't like giving up our secrets that we do, how we do things, but it's probably one of the best ruses I've ever been a part of. He thought he was coming up to see his probation officer, and lo and behold, the lady that told him she wasn't going to give up was sitting right there.
Yeah.
The look on his face was pretty phenomenal. So he gets, I guess we can go ahead and go, but I would like you to talk about the actual scene, if you don't have to be too graphic about it. But I think it's very interesting to let people know what he did to her body after he murdered her. It was pretty interesting, I guess is the word for it.
It was evident that she had been drugged to the location she was found. So Our Lady of Guadalupe Cemetery is a very old cemetery and really small. It's a very small cemetery. And so the way that it's laid out is you enter and there's a porta potty business when you enter on the right side. So you enter, you follow the road, and then it's kind of in the back, and it's just basically a circle. And so if you go and follow the road, there's a fence with farmland behind it. Along that fence is where all of the babies are buried. Not so much anymore, but back in the day, during the time, there was a long time period where all of the babies were just buried along the side, along the fence. Well, he drug her body and laid it out, and he had her arms displayed, one up and one down. She was fully clothed. Her zipper was down, but her shorts were pulled up. She's even had socks on. The socks made it very apparent that she had been drugged because they were pulled down a little bit, and you could also see drag marks, very, very short drag marks, which was evident that she had been drugged from a vehicle because this was a very short distance. And then he laid her shoes right between her feet, and left her there.
Now, if I remember right, he laid her right next to an actual grave.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what was so creepy. She was laying almost like she was in a casket.
Yeah.
Laying next to a grave.
Yeah.
Her shoes were really nicely set beside her feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
very obvious that those shoes had been placed there. It's not like even they were knocked over or on their side or anything like that. Perfectly placed between her legs.
And what our audience may not know is a lot of times when you have a case like that, you have somebody who might have a little remorse, actually feels bad about what he did, and somehow trying to make it better by treating her with respect, laying her there real nice and neat, and putting her shoes in order right next to her for somebody to find her versus just tossing her out of the, dragging her out in the woods and leaving her. So it was an interesting, probably one of the most interesting cases I've worked. I'm glad I got to work it with you. So fast forward to, you made arrangements to contact me, and then where did we go from there?
With the interview?
Well, when you first contacted me, somebody told you to do that, and then we ended up making a plan.
Yes. So we made the plan to go and visit him at the parole office, and
Well, we drove all the way to, it's where DPS headquarters was in right off 290 at 610. There was a probation officer over there. Was it parole or probation? I don't remember.
parole.
Parole. Yeah. And we met Martin up there and set up our little cameras inside. Had cameras set up to where he couldn't see them, and sat him down and had a talk with him. And I'll let her tell the story. She tells it a lot better.
We had video cameras hidden, and we also had audio cameras. Like reading the reports now, I kind of laughed because I was like, boy, we were worried about not getting this on video or tape. And so we were very sure that we wanted to get this recorded.
That was our one shot.
Yeah. And so the interview is going on. In a previous interview with Martin, I had asked him, well, why didn't you do the same thing to the other woman? And I guess he just didn't realize that he was saying it. He said she got away. About the lady who stole his wallet while he was asleep when he had made that report. I brought that up in a previous interview. And so we're interviewing him. He's continuing to deny that he had anything to do with Mary's murder. And then you said, was it on purpose or was it an accident? And he said,
well, that was to give him an out. Because if you remember, right before I said that, I said, we're no longer asking you if you did it. We're telling you you did it. We're just trying to figure out, are you an animal? Are you somebody who has remorse? And we went through that whole spiel with that. And what you said, go ahead.
So you said, was it an accident or was it on purpose? And I mean, again, kind of like the way he did reference the other female of she got away. He was like, it was an accident. And I was like, what in the world just happened here? He just said it because I just totally expected him to just continue on with his theme of I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, and then once he let it out, I still feel like he wasn't completely honest with us about the manner in which he did it. But he went on to explain that she had ripped him off, which is what we've heard. And so in doing the legwork, I had done some interviews where a gentleman had said he saw Mary get into this maroon blazer. They drove off. A little while later, he hears screeching tires and he goes to look, and that vehicle is just speeding away. And then moments later, here comes Mary. And she says she jumped out of his vehicle. And he's like, what are you talking about? And he was like, well, I wanted him to give me my money first. And he said I wasn't getting out of the vehicle, that he wasn't letting me out of the vehicle. So I jumped out. And, she tells the man, yeah, I've ripped him off before. And so he's pissed off that I've ripped him off before. And the gentleman says, Mary, you got to be careful. You got to be careful about getting into vehicles, especially with people who you've pissed off before because you've ripped them off. And he said that her response was F him. And so, yeah, he was pissed, and it came out. And so he says that he was upset that she had ripped him off before, and he just out of nowhere strangled her.
Yeah, I think so. When we're interviewing him, the way you were questioning him and the way I was questioning him back and forth, I think it really got him discombobulated. And I think that's what ended up breaking him, is because he realized at some point that this was it. And once you're right, he didn't give us the full story. I don't know if we'll ever know the full story, but what he did give us in little pieces is how he did it, how he choked her. Do you remember specifically?
We had to work for what we did get out of him. Like we were reenacting. Did you do it like this or did you do it like that? And he was like, yeah, like that. And so I remember you putting your hands on my neck and I was like, okay, I don't like this. But whatever it took for us to get that information out of him, because he was not forthcoming. Yeah, he admitted it, but again, I just wish that he would have given us a little more information and some details.
So he admits to choking her to death, and he said that it took a long time.
Yeah, he said 30 minutes, and then he said 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he stuck to that story. It took a long time. It wasn't as fast as he thought it would be to choke somebody to death.
He said she didn't really fight back, which I find hard to believe because Mary was very feisty. Yeah. I would totally see her fighting back, but
now from the autopsy results, that was consistent with what he said, right?
Ligature strangulation.
Yeah. See, and to me, when they talk about ligature, it's something that he wrapped around her neck and not his hands. Somebody chokes you with your hands, it's very specific on the markings on the neck. So I think you're right about that. I've always thought that he probably stood behind her and pulled something.
Caught her off guard.
But according to him, he choked her with his hands. So
yeah.
So let's see. Jana McCallie was the DA for that case. I remember we walked outside because that's another one that she didn't think we would solve, and we walked out and told her what we had, and she generated a warrant right there while we were at the probation office, and got it to us, and we arrested him right there. Took him down. That's what it was.
Oh, good day.
Yeah. Now, for those of you who don't know, the case was, we have cold case and we have old case. This one's a little bit of both. It was inactive, waiting on DNA results and waiting on a hit, but it wasn't being worked. So it was really a cold case, but more than anything, it was just an old case. It was 2 years old. And once Amy got it, the ball just started rolling really fast. And she did an excellent job closing that case out, made an arrest on it. And she actually got an accommodation. What was the actual accommodation they gave you for that?
Meritorious service.
Say again.
However you say that. How do you say it?
Meritorious?
Meritorious Service Award.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a tribute to the work that she did. And, like we said, I worked that case with her, but I worked other cases with her too. And she was very meticulous. Uh, and she did really good work. So it was an honor for me to be part of this case and help her put this guy in prison for the rest of his life. What was his sentence on that?
I believe he just got 20 years.
40 years. And he was in his 40s then.
Yes.
So what a great case it was. Anything else you want to add to that? The legwork that went into it.
Um, the legwork to me was really fun. I mean, it didn't seem like work back then. Like reading the reports when we found his vehicle and executed the search warrant on that, that was on my birthday. And now I'm thinking, 25 years later, I'm like, I was working on my birthday, 5 o'clock in the evening, and I'm up here getting this vehicle. I don't have any memory of being like, oh, this sucks. I'm working on my birthday. Like to me, it was fun. And so tracking down all of the women and finding those pieces of information that just kind of made everything come together and make the case stronger was to me rewarding
Wow.
and a lot of fun.
That's the days. And now, detectives now still have the same thing, but it was such a rewarding time. We had so many cases going during that time period. You had 3 cold cases. I had 4 or 5 that we were working on. John Foster and I had just finished one. Matt Lemon and I had just finished another one, the T Arena case. And it was a good time to be in law enforcement and to do investigations. And I'm glad I got to be part of it. And I appreciate you letting me be a part of it.
Oh, thank you.
And more than anything, I appreciate you coming in today to share the case with everybody. I think most of the people in this audience will probably find this case very interesting. A lot of people want to hear cases through and through, but there's a lot of things we can't say in these cases. We try to respect the families and not bring up memories and, because this goes out over the social media. So we don't want people that were innocent on the victim or the family of the suspect to be hurt any more by this than they already have. So a lot of this stuff we don't put into these interviews. Well, Amy, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.